Also, number two, the Rebbe asks, the language that the Rashi quotes from the Gemara is also changed. The Loshin in Masechta Orchim is, the language in Masechta Orchim is, Shnayim Bayam, or Shnayim B'mayim, two at the sea, and two at the water. Shnayim Bamon, two at the mon, and Shnayim B'slov, and two at the slov. But Rashi B'Pirushay, but Rashi in his commentary over Hipt Iber de Werter, he skips over the words Shnayim B'mayim, doesn't mention that. He says Shnayim B'yam, skips over Shnayim B'mayim, and he's a koilel in them v'chulu, and that is included in etc. Velcher zok noch Shnayim B'slov, which he says after Shnayim B'slov. So he says Shnayim B'mayim, and then he says Shnayim B'slov, skips over the B'mayim, and then it says v'chulu. Why is that? To me is noch aggressive. The surprise is even greater. That Eitziker from the Allah Tsen, the only one of amongst all of the 10, was the Torah Zog Befedish, which the Torah says very explicitly, as Eden haben der mit Manasseh given the mention that the Jews, they were testing with what they did, Hashem, is from the Shnayim B'mayim, is from the two that took place in the water, der Nisoyen B'Refidim, the test in Refidim. Und Davke, dem Nisoyen, der Mont Nitrashi B'Pirushay from Vayinasu, and Davke, and specifically that one, since Rashi skips over by Mayim, he doesn't mention B'Mayim, doesn't say B'Mayim. So it turns out that this test, Rashi does not mention the Pirushay from Vayinasu. When he's in Koilan, in the Chulan, it's only included, etc. But it doesn't say Befesh. So why is that? So the Rebbe explains now that the question that the Rebbe asked in Siv Dalit, when Rashi quotes from the Gemara, why does Rashi choose to quote just some of them and changes around the Loshen, and he doesn't mention some? So the Rebbe says perhaps we could answer that Rashi's intent here is the Chayravot Megikent Parent from the Shalch Siv Dalid as mit Zayin sein to Mesechet Arochim, that when Rashi references that it's in Mesechet Arochim, is Rashi oisen nit azoi the andere vier nisyonis. It's not that Rashi really wants to mention, oh, and there's additional 4 besides the 6 that he mentions, which he doesn't mention. He only talks about 6. Nor be Iker, mainly Rashi brings down this welche seinen die 6 welche is yomatik, so that we know which are the 6 that he does quote. What does he mean by these 6 as brought down in Masechet Arochim? In other words, Shaz der ben Chomish the Mikdavet Len and then Posik. When the 5-year-old who learns Chumash is going to study this verse, they tested me 10 times. But der Beatzme gefunden Chumash kamen nisyonis, welche stehen befehligt. So on his own, he can find in the Chumash several of the tests which very clearly stated in the Torah. Und Rashi darf nur bewarnen die Erter, and the only places that Rashi has to caution us and to direct us. What we mean is in the places who may can machanatos, in places that you can make a mistake. The riber, darf Rashi nicht mefared sein Shnayim b'mayim. Rashi doesn't need to detail what are the two by the water. Moro, Refidim, doesn't have to detail V'chazayin and Mefurish in Pasuk. They are clearly in the Pasuk. So Rashi doesn't have to say Shnayim b'mayim because that's obvious Shnayim b'mayim. Because Rashi skips over that. While that is it doesn't have to say specifically the Chet Egel B'Chet Meraglim because that's obvious. That's in the Pasuk. But we have questions, but we have questions in other places. Was in Pasuk steht lois ein nisoyin. In the verse, there's just one test. In were fularate, l'savam miblein k'porim b'mitzrayim. That was what the Amto. Muzman tsugam. Rashi has to therefore add quote as an given shnayim b'yam. And these are very nice. Gerechnet yisum sechtarot as there comes sechtarot. By man, same thing is similar by man, we can say to tell you, who has vold givena havamina, there would have been a thought that there could be a third. Maybe you might want to also count as one of them the fact that they asked for the one. Since it was in a way that they complained. Pirush Rambam, as the Rambam explains, that is also even asking the monk was a sin, so that would be a possibility. But Rashi, no, as an example, Shnayim b'mon, it's only two, not three kiddies. So Baruch, as says Naroch, as Shnayim b'mon zayin, and the two in the mon are out to Yisir and out to so don't leave over and don't go out, and they fail them both. Rashi has to say also by this love too. As I'm is because there are opinions of the Sipurim, making them Slav in Parshas B'Shalach and Parshas Aloischa. The stories about the Slav in the portion of B'Shalach and Aloischa, they're not two separate happenings. But it's really the same. That even before Rashi, that's what Rashi cautions says Shnayim the Slav. No, that there's two by Slav. So they're not meant to include those that are not mentioned in Rashi, but they're meant to clarify what are these nisyonis, that they count these and not more than these. But this is something very difficult, very difficult to learn. So, shame, yes, is need klor. Just as it's not clear, whether the asking of the monk should be considered nesoyim, because bread is something which is a must. We must have bread to live on. We would have the same question about Mora. So why wouldn't Rashi have to clarify that? Is on the soil, it's also is a hechrech. For the same reason that the bread may not be in the soil. Similar, it can be a question. The Chaitam is animals in the soil. The Chaitam will also be a test, right? So Rashi is not coming here to tell us which are considered, but also to just include the others. But why does Rashi write it this way, as Rashi does? Vav. So we can say the explanation of all this. That Pirush Rashi do, this Rashi commentary here, kum behemshech zu sein Pirush gleich farder. This comes as a follow-up to the commentary of Rashi immediately before this one. On the word vayinasu, Rashi says kimash shmo as the meaning. What is Rashi telling us? Vayinasu, that it means like the meaning. Mefarshim explain as men ken dem Wort vayinasu abteitschen, bemuvon shel kas, that there is a possibility as translating the word of vayinasu as anger. Vayinasu oisi, they angered me 10 times. Wort Rashi as vayinasu oisi meant, so Rashi cautions us therefore that it means kimash shmoi, as the meaning of vayinasu, they tested. Eden haben ausgeprüft dem Ebersten. The Yidden, they tested Hashem. Weil Pizeh is verantwortet the Pashtus. So now, according to this, it's very simply answered. Favos Rashi kenit onemen shitas Rambam. Why Rashi cannot accept the view of the Rambam as the cheta misoinenim geht rein in cheshbon von nisyonis, that the sin of Ahiyom misoinenim in the parsha is part in cheshbon von the nisyonis. While the chet is a pipshute shamikra, because that particular sin of misoinenim, the das Rashi nit given kein inyan von vayinasu oisi, that wasn't testing Hashem, nor an alila heich lifresh ma'achrei hamokim, but an excuse how to leave and turn away from Hashem. That's why Rashi learns, accepts the commentary, the interpretation of the 10 times as in Masechta Orchim. Because it is specifically these 10 happenings. They have the same sin of they tested me. They were testing Hashem mitzat chalishus and emunah because they were weak in their belief in Hashem. The common thing about these happenings are 10 times they tested, they didn't really believe in Hashem. And thus is dem tam hashinui from the ausgerechente protim. This is also the reason for the change, that the details that Rashi does mention in Pirush Rashi do, and in Pirush Rashi in Parshat Dvarim, in this Rashi here and the Rashi in the portion of Dvarim. In unser Sedre redt sich wegen Unionen welche seinen an Nisoin. In our Sedre we're discussing matters which are a test. In Parshas Dvarim redt sich, but in the portion of Dvarim of there it talks about wegen Divrei Techocha von Moshe, about words of rebuke of Moshe of Chatoim von Eden Bechlal, for sins that Yidden committed in general. Lav davke die welche seinen an Nisoin, not specifically, not necessarily those that were tested. I feel azelche bezainen chatoyim ikrim uklolim from der Hamidbar, even more in main and general sins of the der Hamidbar are also counted in those sins. Rebbe explains, which is the chet bebal pa'ir, that has to do later on the Baal Pa'ir, in which they worship the Avodah Zorah. Himru b'Yamsuf, they rebelled by the Yamsuf. Tofla Lamon, they complained about the Mon. Welchen sie seinen Nennisch geworden, mit den Nechoshim HaSrofim, they were punished with the snakes that burned them. Cheta Meragli Maisa Koiro B'Cheta Egel. Talking about general sins, main sins, general sins, about Pa'ir, Himru b'Yamsuf. But that's not nisyonis. Those are just general sins from which they were punished. But here, now so we're talking about testing. But we need to understand let it be true as is the word vainasu alosh nisoin. In most places, the word vainasu is a language, means a test. But here the pasuk continues. And they didn't listen to me. They didn't hearken to my voice. As need give folk them Hashem. That in actuality they didn't listen to Hashem. It's not just they were testing Hashem and then they did, but it says but it would have been more fitting to Taishu by Nasa Oisi Meloshon Kas, that the Nasa Oisi means the language of anger, or nit Meloshon Esoyin, and not from a test. Should be by Nasa Oisi, they angered me 10 times because it's a Lashon Mavakoili. Not by Nasa Oisi, they tested me because of lack of a move. But Kumuvon, it's understood, Menasa Zain dem Ebersten, you don't have to violate Musnit Zain, verbunden mit Eber Zain, of a Zivum von Ebersten. Testing Hashem does not need to be tied with violating on a command from Hashem, or women that, as we see. As Kama v'Kama for the Asora Nisyonis, that many of these 10 tests was seinen Ausgerechnet in Mesech Orchim, which are enumerated in Mesech Orchim, seinen nicht gewähnt in a Meufung von Leshama B'Koili. They weren't that they didn't listen to Hashem. They tested Hashem, and this was nothing. They didn't violate anything. So why does Rashi choose to learn Kimashmoi Menasa, that it means testing and not like angering Hashem? Is das Boremus, that explanation is the Hecheret for Rashi to Mufader Zayin. Rashi's proof to explain by Nasu Kimashmoi that it means, as the meaning, testing, is nicht nor mitzad dem obteitschen Wort vayinasu. It's not just that's the best way to translate vayinasu, testing, not angering. Nor mitzad klolus teichen Indian, but because of the general, the idea of the subject matter. Und dem Indian died the Rashi, und dem Indian died the Rashi on, and that idea that it fits more, Rashi emphasizes that, points out that by quoting the 3 pairs of tests from Masechta Orchim, come on, as the Rebbe will explain later on. So the Rebbe says that man does verstehen behagdim etliche tzorichin in der Parsha, will understand it by introducing several things that need to be understood in the Parsha. Aleph, number 1. Nachdem wie der Eibishter hat gesagt zu Moshe Rabbeinu, after Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Akenu b'dever v'yirishenu gomer, I will smite him a plague and have them be inherited by somebody else. They'll all perish. But Moshe geteinet zum Eibishter, Moshe argued to Hashem, V'shomu Mitzrayim gomer, so the Egyptians will hear, etc. And they will say to the people who are inhabiting the land, so the Mitzrayim were the Yidden, that Shomu, they heard about the greatness of Hashem, Shemachu, and now now you're going to kill this entire people. So what will the nations say? Goimer, Hashem, Goimer, that Hashem has not the ability, etc. So that needs is Sorechiyun. We can sein as Oyser der Taine v'Amru Hagoyim, without this argument that Moshe presents to Hashem. The Goyim will say, Hashem Goyim, and Hashem is not able to. But Moshe Rabbeinu nid gefunden kein Taines. Moshe Rabbeinu did not find any arguments, the limud schus, and finding some sort of a excuse for the Yidden, if Mavatal sein die Sakone, to negate the danger from Akenu and Rishano, when I'll smite them and I will inherit them. Von alle Yidden, all Yid Shishim Ribui, 600,000, Levad Anoshim V'atav, besides women and children, Un Anoshim Lamato, Ben Chov Lamato, Ben Samach, and men who are younger than 20 and over 60. So what's going on? Needs to be understood. Base, Moshe had given the Meibers, the Moshe requested by Hashem, Shlach no lavoino amazek ki goydel chades decha. Forgive the nation's sin in your great kindness. V'chasher nosos salom azem mitzrayim ve'adheinu, just as you have carried this people from Mitzrayim till here. When the Rebbe of them asking given, Hashem agreed. Und gesagt, salachti kidvarecha. I forgive as you asked. His movement is not understood. About that given the Yidden, since Hashem forgave the Yidden, how come it didn't help completely, fully? She's trust them given the Gzeira, and yet there was the decree in Yuras Ha'oretz Gomer, they will see that they cannot make it to Eretz Yisrael. So we can say the explanation. Das was the Eibishter hat gesagt. This that Hashem says, as the Doir HaMidbar wird nicht hereinkommen in Eretz Yisrael, that the generation of the Midbar will not enter, not come into Israel, Eretz Yisrael, is not in gather von an einish study. It's not a side punishment that comes from the side. Not a tetzot. This is a natural result from their masa, from their sin, from their condition. Das alles was the Meraglim home that zählt wegen Eretz Yisrael. Everything that they related about Eretz Yisrael, the Gevurah from the Yeshvaris, the strength of the inhabitants of the land, is given emes. That was true. Azoi, to such an extent, as there are rangin in Eretz Yisrael, die can't sein Davke, to enter Yisrael can only be oib mahota betochen chozok in Yechelis Hashem. It's only if you have a very strong trust in Hashem's ability and in seine Oises and in his wonders. Nit kukendik of der Gevurah von the Yeshvaris, notwithstanding the force, the power, the strength of those inhabitants of the land. Can that Eibishter geben in them koyach? Hashem has the ability to give the strength to be victorious in a miraculous way. Wie Rashi bringt the raid was Kolov had gesagt. As Rashi brings the words that Kolov said. Did he not split for us the sea? He brought the manna down for us. And he brought us the slav. We will go up, even if it's in the heavens. And he tells us, make ladders, go up there, not sliach. Will be successful in everything he says. Als the oifim for nisim. Everything in a miraculous way. That means that you need to trust Hashem that he can lead you in a miraculous way. But in the way of nature, it's not possible. Und das ist der Pirush Hadvorim, was der Eibishter hat gesagt zu Moshe. This is the meaning of the words that Hashem said to Moshe. How long will they not believe me, despite all the wonders that I've done amongst them? I will smite them, badever. Since they're in a condition they don't believe in all these wonders, so they're not a vessels, they're not vehicles to receive miraculous conduct. So to be led to Eretz Yisrael in a way of all the miracles, they can. It's still oisis, but they don't accept it, so can't bring them to Eretz Yisrael. But as learned earlier, and literally in the simple meaning of the pasuk, if you go with me, carry by chance, then I will go with you also by chance, which means the Eibishter cannot change if that's your mindset, that you don't go by miracles, even though you see them, and still you say, no, it has to be nature. Okay, then, therefore, so the Rebbe said, I will smite him because I can't bring him in Eretz Yisrael. I've done what Moshe answered. So Moshe answered, Shomim Mitzrayim Gomer v'Amru Gomer Mibilti Yicheles Hashem Gomer. So the Egyptian will hear this. What will they say? Mibilti Yicheles V'Bal Dergan Sertam Ponaken Gomer. Since the whole reason why you will smite them, Heitzich on it starts is Mitzadem Lo Yaminu Bi, because they don't believe in me. Is the Chadarabah. So then, on the contrary, if you kill the nation like one man, but Goyim Zayin, as the Lo Yaminu Bi, that they're not believing, Zol Zayin, in noch aggressor, it'll be even more not believing. Mitzrayim will Zogim, it built Yicheles Hashem. So this will bring the Egyptians to say that Hashem is not able to. So you're worried about Moshe's arguing to Hashem that the Yidden is Lo Yaminu Bi, and that's why you say that they're not going to go into Eretz Yisrael. But this condition is going to bring to a further Lo Yaminu Bi. The Mitzrayim will say, "We built the Yicheles." I forgive you because, like you spoken, Rashi is Mefarish. Rashi explains, Masha Marto, because of what you said, from you Pen Yoimru, they built the Yicheles Hashem because they'll say that Hashem is not able to. Aber this Licha Namtarok dem Chet, Ubemela dem Einish. That forgiving removes the sin and also the punishment, as is only Zayin Nemat Kishachot, not to die as one person, as one altogether immediately. But with regards not to go into Eretz Yisrael, that forgiveness did not help. But the chesorn in them is canal, because the lacking is not a punishment. It's not punishing for a sin. The fact they don't believe, despite all the wonders, then you have to conquer it in the way of nature. And naturally, the nation is a powerful one, a strong one. And the Derem Abel is not able to conquer Eretz Yisrael. Good. Because analysis move on. So based on all the above, we understood Rashi Muslim Mefarer Zayin, where Rashi needs to explain by Nasuki Mashmoi that it means that you tested, literally testing, not angering. Even though as from the flow, the continuous language of the verse, it can appear. Avainasu do is Loshen Kas. Vainas is a language of anger. Since they didn't listen to my voice. Is over from Klolus Teuchen Parsha movement, still from the general content of the Parsha, it's evident that the Chesorn from Vayinasu Oisi, what is the lacking? Why happens? Because they test me by state in Chalishus Muna from the Amidbar. It's not the violation of any sin, but their lack of Emunah, the lack of they didn't believe. Was dosis given the Siba to the Gezeda in Yuras Oretz Gamer. That was the reason. They're not going to be able to see that remain that way because they can't live an experience of miraculous because it just is not, they're not accepting that. From a we can also understand why Rashi only explains these 6 tests. Because it's specifically in these tests is mudgish or nicker, it's emphasized, and you can tell to the extent how much strength in the belief they were lacking. He's move on based on as understood. Why Moshe could not impact to negate the decree in Yiras Ha'oretz Gomer is because it wasn't a punishment over here. It was just because they don't have the Emunah. This tells us that it's all about the lack of the Emunah Indeed, those tests which brought about a lack of Amunah, and that's why Moshe can't bring them to Eretz Yisrael with that kind of a standing, with that kind of an attitude. Yudal, the beer of them. In a Friedrich Posik state, in the previous Posik, it states that the Eibishter had gesagt, Hashem said, Ve'ad ono lo yaminu bi, how long will they not believe b'chol oisis, despite all the wonders that was enkin do, wo es redt wegen der Geseira im Yiras Haaretz Gomer. If they will see, they won't see the land. Or the Eibishter gesagt dem Loschen, didn't say, he said the language, he called her Noshim, all the people that saw my glory and they saw my wonders that I did in Mitzrayim, and they tested me. It doesn't we didn't believe it. There's a change. It doesn't say you didn't do it. The phone is Rashi Medayik as the chet from Vainasu Oisi, that the sin of Vainasu Oisi is in them inyan harber minu bistam. In our case, it's even more serious than just generally not believing. Because the far is the sasiba, and that's why it's a reason. As I feel and know them with the even after Hashem forgives the Eden for their sin, and as you have said, they still cannot conquer Israel. How is this a more serious offense? Even relative to not just believing Hashem plain, and we're saying this is Vayinasu. It's verstandig, it's understood. They don't believe because of despite all the wonders I did amongst them. They don't believe in those godly signs that were shown. That's something that you can, there's an advice how to tackle that. There is a solution. You will show them a greater and even a wondrous miracle and proof. Then you will have to believe Hashem, in Hashem's ability. Eventually that will bring you to believe in Hashem. As the Pasuk says, they won't believe for the first miracle, so they believe the last miracle. That is if it's just a matter of believing. Is their matzav, the condition they're testing me, we're talking about people that see as they see Hashem's glory presently. His wonders that I've done in Egypt and the Midbar. They see and they recognize that the Hashem made these wonders. And yet, they were still testing Hashem. 10 times. This was gebracht as when the Shama didn't listen to me. Is was that helpful? As man wird beweisen noch, so how is it going to help? To show even greater one. As bleibt noch als amokim l'Messiah. There is still, notwithstanding, you can believe, but you can still keep on testing Hashem. And you tested Hashem not despite the fact that you saw. And at the same time is Vayinasu Oisi. So there's nothing that's basically, you can't help them to change them around. Yud base. The Oifen is Vayinasu Oisi. And the way, even in by Nasois, how did it test Hashem? In the dry sugi missiones was Rashi brings. Those express themselves in three categories of missiones that Rashi brings. By Zay is the dover v'yipucha, by them is the item, and its opposite. The paradoxes. Roim es kavodi, they see God's glory. Best oisoisa and my wonders, Gleimer. Ubiyachad im zeh v'inasa is still the testament. Given in themselves inyan guf in the same. Bayam was the zweite nisoyin is given Shas aliyos min hayam. The second one was when they're going up from the water. Was Yidnom Gizok, they said, Kishem Shano Eilu Mitzad Zeh. Just as we're going up from this side, Kach Mitzrayim Eilu Mitzad Achad. The Egyptians are going up from the other side. So in the Zelbert side, when the Ebersten, Hot Fazei Gemach dem Groisunes from Kriyas Yamsu. At the time that Hashem made you this huge miracle, Kriyas Yamsu, Ob Eden B'Shas Maisa Gufa. So at the same time, Menaskim and the Ebersten, they were still testing Hashem. And they were arguing, maybe they also were saved. They're still testing Hashem. They're saying, but here the Eibusher is doing a miracle. What did the two by Mon? Don't go out. They did go out. Don't leave one left over. The Mon is given and Eis Golem. The Mon was an open miracle. Abri Chadosh, something new creation. Lechem and Hashemayim, bread coming from the heavens. Und in Mon, und mit dem Mon Gufa, so in the Mon and with the Mon itself, und mit dem Menaskim and the Meibishter, they were still testing Hashem with it. The Meibishter hat angesagt. Al Tesiru, he says, don't leave over. Und sie haben geprüft the Meibishter, by Yesiru, and they tested him, and they did leave over. The Meibishter hat gesagt, as wie Yom HaShabbos. On the day of Shabbos, he will not make the miracle of the sending of the mon. On the Faral Teitzu, that's why don't go out. So they did go out in the field. Always proven on Zen, see the mon is going. They were testing to see, did the mon really come down? After is nicht ausgehalten. Maybe it's not, doesn't really hold up. Those was the Eberster gesagt. That's what Hashem said. That Shabbos vet and nit machen dem nes from Yeri the Samon. That on Shabbos he will not make the miracle of the descent of the month. Well, derech ze beim Slav. And a similar way it's also by this law. Was idnom geteinet miachelene bossa. He said, who's going to feed us meat? Das heißt, no, then we made the yom b'yom is gegangen in der Mond min Hashemayim. Every day, every single day, day after day, the Mond came min Hashemayim. Only shit as Rashi, Slav, Rashi, according to Rashi, also the Slav, on Afal Pikain and yet Be'ez as his Avu type. They were desiring the types and Givot of Merer Bosser, they wanted more meat. I'm saying, you can't, I found a Sveka, a Sophic. And then there's all of a sudden a doubt. They were testing. And they said, as the boss was a villain, that they want meat, in addition to the first slav, because we were talking about the second slav, two slavs. Can the Rebbe not get? Maybe the Rebbe can't give that. So the Rebbe is giving you, you're having the first slav. You're eating mon min hashemayim. You're eating already slav also. Shenkin, the andere nisyon as opposed to the other test. The shnayim b'mayim, the two in the water, that needed the water, wanted the water, or it was bitter, morer, fidim, uncheit ha'egel, v'cheit ha'meraglin, and the sin the egel meraglin is not given der dover v'yipuchay in the inyan gufa. But there wasn't paradox in the matter itself. On their far is Rashi's and Nidmatic Befeders. That's why Rashi does not quote him explicitly. What's the lesson from all the above in the Vedas Hashem? The Musgedenken must remember a giful and darf sein Gehit, Zohir und Zoris, to be careful and to be quick as the oasis of the Eberster weist, Lahaprat, the signs that the Eberster shows to the individual, und zum Klal and to the community in general, so Poil sein mit der ganze Starkheit. They should impact with a full force on the Meise bepoil to bring to action. When in apnimis, in an inner way, ma dochas baim der deya von der hamabel. Since it's a foratory, since we see that even by this generation of knowledge of the Der HaMidbar, great generation, what gekannt sein, it was able to be as noch the Oisus. Soll sein der Venas Oisus as upon, despite all the signs, should testing Hashem still 10 times. How much more so in the generation of the hills of Mashiach, darf man ton, need to do and do, bis zu sein sicher, to be sure as ben hotes bavoren that you have taken care of it. Durch dem, was jeder wird sich misbeinen sein. Everybody reflecting. In the Aces was the Eibishter had getan, in the wonders that Hashem has done. Mit ihnen als klar, with the Jews as a whole. Mit jeden einem als prat, and with each one as an individual. His boinen is in an eye for reflection in a way, as das nimmt ihn durch den Ganzen, it totally encompasses it, takes him through. Is das Meichen Eden to the Knesset Eretz Yisrael. This prepares the into entering Eretz Yisrael. The Mashiach Tzidkenu, the righteous Mashiach, the Geula HaMitis, the true redemption, HaNitzchi, the eternal redemption, which is not followed by exile, in the wake of Tochas HaKosov, as the promise of the Pasuk made Tzeichem Eretz Mitzrayim, that just as the day you left Egypt was the sea is given to Oisosai, that came through Hashem's signs, Asher Asisi Mitzrayim, that I did in Egypt. That Zayin Bekorev will see very soon at the end of the floors. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Shalch Tovshin Lamed Dalet.